Some of you watching or listening probably don't know who Reggie Gold is, but for those of us that have been around a while, or those of you who are religious about learning your chiropractic philosophy, he was one of the great minds when it came to the principles of chiropractic of our profession's history, and certainly maybe the number one mind of his age. And he would kind of break it down into some pretty simple terms. He'd say, all I'm suggesting about subluxation is that if I was squeezing your artery coming from your heart to the rest of your body, if I was squeezing your aorta, you're better off if I let it go, if I release the interference. And it's the same thing with your nerves. All we're suggesting is that if there's a subluxation and it's compressing the nerves and squeezing your spinal cord, that if we let it go, remove the interference, your body's a whole lot better off. And he'd say simple stuff like that. One of my favorite philosophical points, and that's what I wanted this quick recording to be about, is just what my favorite points have been throughout the years, and certainly Reggie's was one of many. But Dr. Joe Accurso, who was a mentor of mine, he said something during one of his great speeches where he said that either a subluxation is the worst thing that could ever happen to a human being, or what we do as chiropractors is a complete and total fraud. Now, that's a powerful statement by Dr. Accurso. And he went on to say that if you get shot by a gun, at least you're dead. But when you're subluxated, it changes your lenses, changes the lenses on your glasses. And as a result, you see life completely differently than you're born to see it. That everything you were born to be, everything you're supposed to be, is lost. And that was his point why it would be better to get shot by a gun, at least you're dead, because nothing is sadder to him, and through many of the great philosophers of all kinds throughout history, nothing is sadder than what might have been. Nothing's worse than lost potential, which is what you get with subluxation. One final piece that's kind of this evolution we've seen today, but goes all the way back to D.D. Palmer and B.J. Palmer, and now we're seeing it with, for example, some of Heidi Havoc's work on subluxation in the brain. D.D. and B.J. talked about the fact that when you were subluxation free, your antenna to God was at its maximum strength. And so that you could fully hear the directions for your life so that you can go out and make the right choices to reach your potential, to achieve God's purposes, to fulfill your destiny, that there was a greater likelihood of that when that antenna was at full strength, what could only happen if you didn't have a subluxation. Very powerful. And now what we're finding out is that when you get adjusted, your prefrontal cortex can work up to 85% better. And what has been being talked about quite a bit even before Dr. Havoc is just the integration, that when you're subluxated, there's a problem with integration. So you've got the limbic system, which is the emotional seat of the brain, got the prefrontal cortex, which is the logic and decision-making component. And if those aren't working well together, you can make emotional decisions, which tend to be bad decisions or even violent decisions, like you react. They've done studies on police officers that have injured people where they've been in the same situation hundreds of other times and haven't. And they say, well, under that kind of stress, and we're in all that fight or flight going on, if that integration isn't sound, we can make bad decisions that we regret later. And so we talk about chiropractic changing the world when that antenna is at full strength and you've gotten adjusted and there's all that integration, my prefrontal cortex, the planning, the thinking, the decision-making part of my brain is at full strength. It's integrated. So my emotional decision-making, my logical decision-making are balanced. Then you have changed that person's world so they can go out there and also change the world. You make the world a better place. And B.J. Palmer talked about that being his great purpose, which is to make the world a safer, saner place for decent people to live. That's right out of the Green Books. Great mission statement. Chiropractic, to make a world a safer, saner place for decent people to live. And while that might have been philosophical before, we now know it's also the science of chiropractic.